Hi, I'm Pat Kapowich, and today we are speaking about Prop 21. Stay tuned. Okay, we have a surprise guest today to speak about Prop 21. David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Great, thank you so much. My name is David Campos. I am chair of the San Francisco Democratic Party, and I do that in my spare time. And I also work in Santa Clara as a deputy county executive, but I'm here today in my personal capacity as the head of the San Francisco Democratic Party. Thank you for the invitation.
You bet. So you work in Silicon Valley?
I do.
And do you take the train up?
Sometimes. Unfortunately, the nature of the work, I have offices in different parts of the county, so I do drive more often than I'd like to, but the train works very well too.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, we are here with Prop 21. If you could just give a broad overview, and then I'd like to hit the history of these issues, and we'll get back to it.
Yes, thank you very much. And Prop 21 essentially gives every jurisdiction in the state of California the freedom, the liberty, the authority to enact local rent control. The way that it works right now in California, local jurisdictions are precluded as a matter of state law from deciding for themselves whether or not to institute rent control at the local level. And that's because of a law passed, the Costa Hawkins. This proposition essentially undoes Costa Hawkins and basically allows local jurisdictions to control their own fate when it comes to housing costs and rent in particular.
Okay, you mentioned the Costa Hawkins Rental Housing Act. Let's speak about that. 1995, what did that do?
It essentially, precluded local jurisdictions from instituting rent control on housing moving forward. And from our perspective, those of us who have been fighting and advocating for affordable housing throughout the state, it essentially tied the hands of local jurisdictions to be able to address a housing crisis that has been a crisis for years. And I can tell you from my own experience in San Francisco, before I was lucky enough to buy property in San Francisco, I rented. And the only reason that I could stay in San Francisco, as is the case for so many renters, is because of rent control. And Costa Hawkins precluded many jurisdictions in other parts of the state from protecting their renters by making rent control available.
Okay. And then Prop 10 failed in 2018.
Well, as is expected, any time that you try to change a system, especially a law, and you go against well-funded special interests, you're going to have a hard time. And in that case, you had the real estate industry, the apartment associations, and big-time property owners in California that spend a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars, to defeat that effort. And quite frankly, they did so by confusing voters and by, really providing a lot of false information about what we were trying to do. Nevertheless, as is the case with anything that is worth fighting for, you have to keep at it. And in this case, we believe that this is the right time to bring back rent control. The reality is that as much as it has been a crisis, this housing crisis over the last few years, COVID-19 and this pandemic has exacerbated that crisis to the point that not only are we facing people dying because of COVID, but we are facing a very real possibility that people will be thrown out on the street in the middle of a pandemic. And that's why Prop 21 is so critical, to give local jurisdictions not automatically the power to institute rent control, but at least the ability to do so if going through the process they believe it's the right thing for themselves.
Okay, now last year it was approved AB 1482.
And listen, that was a step in the right direction, but it was actually a very small step. The reality is that it was a temporary fix, a Band-Aid, if you will, and one that was crafted with a lot of input from the real estate and apartment association special interests. It didn't go far enough. It was put forward by an assembly member here in San Francisco that has close ties to real estate and those interests. So it's not surprising in that sense that what came out was something that didn't really get the job done. The fact is that housing costs are going up, continue to go up, and this bill did not address that issue. And so we need real rent control, real reform, and we're not going to get it from Sacramento. There are special interests. There are so many lobbyists who essentially run that town, who have control of the state legislature. And it's sad for me to say that as a Democrat, but even though we have a Democratic supermajority, the Democratic Party there has not done enough to protect renters. And it's going to take voters taking the step of actually passing this measure to finally do something about this housing crisis.
Now, the arguments against, they are saying it undermines a stronger statewide rent control. What do they mean by that?
I don't know what they mean by that. I think that they somehow feel that having uniformity across the state makes more sense. The reality is if what you have across the state is weak, which is what we have right now, that doesn't really provide the needed protection. I think that's just a red herring and something that they're trying to do to confuse people.
They are also claiming that the home values reduces the home values up to 20%.
There is no evidence of that. And look, the arguments against any kind of government protection of tenants essentially follows the supply side Reaganomics view of the world that somehow the free market is going to change, protect people, and it's going to be the answer. The reality is that the free market will not solve the situation without any kind of real meaningful regulation. What the free market will do is that it will actually increase costs and will ensure that the wealthy get even wealthier. And look, what we're saying is not drastic measures, but simply giving every local jurisdiction to decide for itself what is right, instead of having a one-size-fits-all approach that was essentially put in place by the real estate corporate interests that have driven housing policy in California, and to this day essentially are creating a housing policy that only favors those who are the wealthiest. And in the meantime, working class people, working class families, low income families, middle class families are being left out. And the younger generations of our state can no longer afford to own a home, can no longer afford to even live here, which is what this does. It makes rent control a reality if the local jurisdiction decides that it's the right thing to do.
Now, they are also claiming this is an extreme regulation. Is this, first of all, establishing the rental market? Is that what you were speaking about, from market to market?
Right. Well, look, I think it's like they want to have their cake and eat it too, right? Because in some respects, they're saying that allowing local jurisdictions to decide for themselves is extreme regulation. But there's actually nothing more extreme than imposing a one-size-fits-all solution, which is what Costa Hawkins said. Costa Hawkins basically said jurisdictions in California cannot take these steps, rent control being one of them, to protect their renters. That is extreme. This is actually more modest, and actually it's a recognition that one size does not fit all, and that within the counties of California, there could be different approaches. What works in San Francisco may not work in San Diego or Los Angeles, but let's let every jurisdiction decide for itself what's right for that jurisdiction.
In terms of the backers, it's interesting that there's veteran groups on both sides of this proposition. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think that there are different perspectives, and quite frankly, I think that there's a lot of misinformation. A lot of people are basically trying to create a parade of horribles. If Prop 21 happens, that somehow property values are going to go down, that somehow it's going to diminish housing supply in the state of California. A lot of misinformation that is not really backed up by facts, evidence, or any kind of analysis. And so in that sense, it's not surprising that people who should be for this, are not. And so our job as an underfunded campaign that doesn't have a lot of money, that doesn't have the big bucks that the real estate industry has, we are going to do everything we can between now and the election to educate people so that they're not misled by the millions of dollars that will be spent by those that are opposing this measure. And those that are opposing this measure are people who have a financial interest because they have made money under the current system that essentially has made it harder for working class and middle income people to live in California.
Now, is that a rental board? Is it going to be rental boards that are created? Is that it? They claim unelected rental boards. What does that mean?
I don't even know what that means. I think that, rental boards, to the extent that there is creation of those, they're created through elected bodies, representatives. Again, another type of misinformation that is put out there.
Mm-hmm. I like your term, a parade of horribles. Is that an industry term?
Well, you know what? It's a term that I have used in the past and that I have heard with just about everything that is progress or progressive, or it's a step forward, has been described before it happens as a parade of horribles. As a gay man, I can tell you, before same-sex marriage was legal, there was this fear that the sky was going to fall if LGBTQ people were allowed to marry. The housing industry, real estate industry, is afraid that the sky's going to fall if they don't have the free market, control everything. But they don't really, believe what they're saying. I mean, I think what they want is not even free market. What they want is actually to control things themselves, which is what they have been doing by saying, we are not going to allow local jurisdictions to do what they decide is right for themselves. And they try to describe it as a parade of horribles, but it's actually just democracy in action, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Now, in closing here, David, where can people go on the internet to learn more about this Prop 21?
Well, I don't remember the exact site, but if you Google Prop 21, you can find out more information. What I would say is this, that we're going to be out there. I know that in San Francisco, the local Democratic Party is campaigning hard for Prop 21. I'm the co-chair of the Northern California campaign. And I just want people to know, do not be fooled by the misinformation that will be put out between now and November 3rd.
Great. Thank you, David. You've been a great guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Happy to come back anytime.
Wonderful. Take care now. This is Pat Kapowich. We will be up next with another guest on Prop 21. Welcome back. We have a special guest. Ernie, you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Ernie Powell. I'm a organizer with a national organization called Social Security Works. I cover all of California, and I live in Los Angeles.
Now, a little bit of trivia. We know you're a political junkie if you're 11 years old and you get on a bus and you go and see Jack Kennedy speak, right?
It was the first time my parents ever let me go far away from home alone.
That's a great
And I
story.
did see President Kennedy
Young Kennedy.
make his acceptance speech at the Los Angeles Coliseum when he ran for president.
Okay, well, I'm sure he'd be proud of you to be, going through the ranks of political circles here. And today we're talking about Prop 21. What is Prop 21?
Prop 21 is a statewide ballot measure by initiative that allows cities to choose to create rent control in their city or in their jurisdiction or county. Right now, they're prohibited from doing that, and this will change that.
Okay, now throughout the literature, we come across the Costa Hawkins Rental Housing Act, which is the two lawmakers, and I guess they pulled them together in 1995.
Correct. And it was Costa Hawkins came out of the California legislature. It won by one vote, and it stopped cities from initiating rent control. Cities didn't have to get rid of rent control, but it stopped them in the future from initiating it.
Okay, because at that time, I think we had 6 cities that had it in California: Santa Monica, Berkeley.
Santa Monica, Berkeley, Los Angeles soon to follow. Yeah, LA, San Francisco, etc.
Okay. And then in 2018, we had Prop 10, which failed. What was Prop 10 about?
Prop 10 was close to what we're doing this time. However, this time we have more renter protections. Homeowner protections fundamentally stay the same. And we are hopeful, well, we're not hopeful, we are confident that on the second try, we will win. And California residents will have the ability, if they choose to, on a city-by-city basis, to have rent control.
All right. Now, AB 1482 did pass in 2019. What's
Right.
the
And it caps rents. It also has protections on some eviction protections. It was a well-intended bill, but what's interesting about it is that 3 of the primary authors, or the primary authors on the Assembly side, even though they supported their own bill, have now endorsed Prop 21. The other problem with the bill that you just mentioned is that it sunsets. That means it goes away in 2 years. So we could wind up in the same situation of rents being increased, et cetera, with 21, we make rent control permanent. But the key point about Prop 21 is that no one is forcing anybody to do it. It's on a city-by-city basis.
Okay.
So if a city council, let's say the city of San Bernardino, which is near where I grew up, decides that for whatever reasons they need to institute rent control, this will enable them to do it at the municipal level.
I see. Now, how did this come about? After we just passed the law in 2019, how did this get on the ballot so quick?
Well, I think a lot of it came because of the COVID-19 crisis and literally the downward spiral of the economy, the loss of lots of jobs. People became very much housing insecure. And also the objective conditions in California are really tough on renters. Renters in California typically pay a higher percentage of their income for rent. And so even with the bill that was passed, I think it's smart to make rent control permanent in California, but the way that it's done and designed in 21 to make it up to the cities if they so choose. So it eliminates the Costa Hawkins bill, and it enables cities to choose to go with rent control if they want to or need to.
Now, how would the cities monitor this? Would there be a rent control board within a city?
The cities that I know of that have rent control, such as Berkeley, Santa Monica, Los Angeles, either have a rent control board or sometimes it's called a rent stabilization board. And that in Santa Monica, they are elected by a vote of the people. They have their term limited. They have 4-year terms. And I think they can have 3 4-year terms. And so, again, it's a situation where the voters themselves are in charge to elect people to monitor and enforce rent control when a city chooses to do that.
Okay. So now...
and one other point, Pat, if I could make this point. When you look at the television commercials from the no side, you get this terrible impression that everything's being forced on on local jurisdictions. Everything's, this is going to get forced on everybody involved. That's not true. Every city will decide. They'll have the ability to decide.
Okay, now.
If they choose to.
Okay. Now, again, some of the opponents said this encourages landlords to evict tenants. What does that mean?
Well, first of all, rent control, evictions are, there's more eviction protections in California, some of it due to COVID-19, but otherwise because of good legislation than ever before. You cannot evict a tenant in California except if there's a reason around non-payment of rent or misconduct of some sort. Now, they may evict because they've chosen to go out of business. That they have a right to do. But, I know a lot of happy landlords all over LA and all over Santa Monica, because I live in Southern California, that have adapted to rent control, who know what the law is and have done very well anyway. So we're not in favor of we are in favor of landlords making a fair return on on their investment, but we're also in favor of protecting our homes and not having families thrown out on the street. California has one of the highest rates of homelessness, and it went up. Homelessness in our state went up over 16% in 2019. So this is a corrective measure to the tragedy of homelessness, amongst other things.
Okay, now part of the opposition says that this will slow down the building of new homes, new rentals.
Well, I don't really see it. Number one, new construction is exempted, and so people can build. So it doesn't. It's not a problem for new building. I think the problem with home construction is based on land costs and other factors not having to do with rent control. The price in California for land is very expensive, and so I don't think you can put that on regulatory legislation that has to do with people remaining safe in their homes and not losing their homes because they can't afford them.
Well, now, what some of the groups that are against, we have veterans on both sides of this issue, veteran groups on both sides.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. What, now, in terms of the TV commercials, we have veterans that are opposing it, saying that rents.
Well, that's certainly their right, but we also have veterans that support it too. So there are changes from what was proposed 2 years ago. All right, and the main and so we think that we've improved on what was attempted in 2018. And what we're most proud about is that we don't force it onto any municipality. Again, I keep repeating the same theme because I think it's important. Cities can choose or not choose to institute rent control if Prop 21 passes.
Okay. Now, in terms of UCLA did a study that we are facing a surge in homelessness. Can you speak to that?
I can. It's because, to say it in a blunt way, the rent is too damn high. I mean, if you look at rental levels, for example, African-American tenants in San Francisco spend 43.7% of their income. Strike that. Strike that. 74.8% in San Francisco African-American renters spend in the city by the bay. Los Angeles African-American renters spent 63.7%. Latino statewide, 60% spend over 30%. So the rent is high. I make the point that we need to get this under control, and we think that this will greatly improve the situation.
And that was part of the point. In California, our rents are 50% higher than the rest of the country. our rents in California are higher than the rest of the nation.
True, because we have essentially a laissez-faire sort of non-enforcement of anything. We need rent control to get that. We need the regulatory power that cities will choose to use if they want to in order to get that under control.
So again, you're making the point that they're not forced to do it.
No way.
You will
No way.
decide.
They're not. No, this is not. It's statewide legislation that enables local jurisdictions to choose rent control.
Mm-hmm. Now, why is the governor against it?
I think he was satisfied with what he saw. I don't know. I actually have never read any of his statements about it. It's a disappointment that he was. I think he was satisfied with what he saw. But ultimately, that's what the initiative process is about, to tell our politicians what we need. And that was a disappointment. But we think in the long term, he'll see that it's a good idea.
Okay, we have 1 minute left, it looks like. What is some of the backers? What are some of your backers for this proposition?
Prop 21, well, first
Right.
of all, my organization, which is called Social Security Works, the ACLU, the AFL-CIO, we have they support it. The AIDS Health Foundation supports it. There's probably 30 or 40 statewide and national organizations, probably more than that have endorsed it. It's a very popular piece of legislation that we think that when people study it and look at it, we think it has a very good chance of passing.
Okay. Ernie, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. I know it was short notice. And if somebody wants to learn about this, we go to your website?
Absolutely. It's Yes on 21, www.yeson21.
Great. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon, my friend.
It's a pleasure, Pat. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks again for watching. This is Kapowich on Real Estate, a show dedicated to consumer protection. Take care.